So like I said, I want to take this one step further just to kind of nip this in the bud, so to speak, this Islamic dilemma, or so-called Islamic dilemma, which is a hypothetical of, the Quran, basically. So if, so let's think about this logically, right? Because I'm a very systematic, logical person, or I try to be. So if the Quran was exactly the same as the Bible and nothing was different, then the response from a Christian would be, what's the point, right? Like if the Quran, the final testament, is the exact same as the New Testament or the Old Testament, then there would be no point of sending a new message or a new messenger, right? If the Quran was entirely different, right? So there was nothing the same. So the Quran was completely different from the Bible, from the New and Old Testaments, and there was nothing the same. The response would be, how could this be true when it literally contradicts the previous scriptures, right? There has to be consistency. God is not the author of confusion. God does not lie. The truth doesn't change. And then finally, if the Quran was both confirming and correcting, then the response is, this is the only logical route. So I want... Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
That's good. No, that's a good way. It's a good way of putting it. So I'm a little bit unique in the sense that I don't believe the New Testament is even teaching monotheism. I'm willing to say that there's an evolution of theology in the Old Testament, and that by the time you get to 2nd Isaiah, right, also Deuteronomy, finally you have monotheism amongst the Israelites. So after a long battle with all of these sort of polytheistic elements, they were finally able to expurgate all of these types of polytheistic notions by the time 2nd Isaiah was written. And so that's the peak of their Tawheed. However, I would say that with Hellenization, which began in the 3rd century before the Common Era, the children of Israel, right, the Israelites, many of them did have a backsliding into a type of polytheism because of Hellenistic influence, this idea of the two powers in heaven heresy. And I think that the authors of the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, although these books are anonymous, whoever wrote them, as well as Paul, I think these were two powers in heaven heretics. And that's why the New Testament is so difficult to deal with theologically. Is it monotheism? Is it teaching Unitarianism? Is it teaching Trinitarianism? I would say it's teaching neither one of these. It's not Unitarian nor Trinitarian. It's teaching a type of henotheism or ditheistic polytheism. There are two gods. There's a high God, the Father, and there's a lesser God, the Son, who is ontologically inferior to the Father. So I think the New Testament is reflection of this two powers in heaven heresy. And many Jews that are non-Christian also fell into that heresy. You find this in the Talmud, Jews worshiping the Metatron, right? Worshiping the angel that they believed was the Son of God. They call him Yahweh Qaton, the lesser Yahweh, the diminutive God, things that the Son of God sits on God's throne. They pray to him directly. So it wasn't until the 3rd, 4th, 5th centuries coming up to Islam where the rabbis finally were definitive and said, this is shirk and we need to get rid of it. And so that's what I think is going on. So, but my point is, the Quran does restore that true Isaianic. That's the peak of their Tawhid, Deutero-Isaiah, right? There is no God but Yahweh, right? And God is one. There are no other gods beside me. We also find similar types of verses in the book of Deuteronomy, 7th century BCE, right around that time, when they finally reached the peak of their theology. And then again, there was a backsliding, unfortunately. But Islam comes and restores that. So yeah, I mean, theological consistency is very, very important.